Hi, I'm Dr. Renee Turchi, Plymouth Whitemarsh High School Distinguished Graduate and Pediatrician at St. Christopher's Hospital for Children, and you're watching CITV.
I'd like to welcome all of you once again to this ceremony, and I appreciate it, students. I know it's a busy time of year for the teachers, for the students, and I'm hoping that after this ceremony you'll see the value of being here this afternoon to hear three remarkable alumni inductees as distinguished graduates. This is one of the most rewarding ceremonies since we honor three outstanding graduates to my right, welcome back alumni, and brings the members of the school community together for one event. In the audience today, we have many of our current 9th, 10th, and most likely not 11th and 12th grade students, members of our faculty, and also up front we have seated the inductees, families, friends, and alumni and DGO members here at Plymouth Whitemarsh High School. Dr. Gordetzer, our superintendent of schools, present, as well as members of our school board, Mrs. Moore, as well as Mrs. Feingold. We'd like to thank them for being here. I want to talk to you about the purpose before we begin of what distinguished graduates, what it means, as well as why it's so important. The committee, consisting of alumni such as Mr. Gallagher, an English teacher, we have Dr. Iannelli, who's a former principal here at Plymouth Whitemarsh High School, as well as Mrs. Moore, a school board member, Dr. Gordetzer, and we have Mr. Sherm, Ms. Newell help out as well, and Mr. Hutchinson to my left is the president. We get together and analyze a variety of applications of who in the community, in America, in the world overall, would be a great influence on you. Who's a remarkable student, former student at Plymouth Whitemarsh High School who would make a distinguished graduate at PW. The committee gets together, reviews all the applications and hundreds of applications, and we find the best. And we have three of the best this year, without a doubt, to my right. And before I move on, we do have some distinguished graduates that are here in the crowd today I'd like to recognize, if they can please stand. Dr. Scott Goldberg, inducted in 1997, if you can please stand. Gary Johnson, recognized in 2012, former board president. Mr. Lawrence Oschlegel, inducted in 2016. Dr. Elizabeth Janssen, present today. Give a round of applause for the year 2010. Mr. James D'Onofrio, Coach D. He was inducted in 2011. Mr. Ed Spakowski, inducted in 2000. And we have Mrs. Donna Dreisen, former principal of Whitemarsh Elementary School. She was inducted in 2001. Excellence. So we look at every year as a committee to find three of the best. Plymouth Whitemarsh High School, me as an alumni here, we have such a rich tradition. A tradition of excellence that spans over 60 years. Our school district, our schools, you can see with our renovation project, they continue to evolve. With new and innovative practices and newly renovated spaces and a building. However, what makes us so special is the tradition of excellence spanning over 60 years as a school community. To keep this culture alive, we recognize distinguished graduates and honor them to continue this rich tradition and recognize exemplary graduates who serve as great role models for you as current students and future students K-8. Today, we have the honor of inducting three outstanding and distinguished Plymouth Whitemarsh High School graduates. We have Miss Keown-Blackburn, graduate in 1966. We have Mr. Bruce Frankle, class of 1969. And we have Miss Susannah Ludwig, class of 1989. They were looking through their yearbooks in the library, which was amazing. You see them laughing, what great stories and memories they had from White Marsh High School many, many years ago. So really, what a unique opportunity that we have of 3 outstanding and remarkable alumni here today. So take advantage of this opportunity, listen to their stories, their experiences, and I ask of you to find at least one component and one nugget from their path to help guide you here at White Marsh High School and beyond. The 3 inductees are not only the best of the best, but their stories and experiences speak to their passion in their field, challenges they embrace, and how they inspire everyone around them. We hope this afternoon they will inspire you as well. Thank you for being a great audience today. Looking forward to an outstanding ceremony. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce our president, Mr. Mark Hutchinson.
Welcome students, faculty, and guests. This is the 32nd year that our organization has been recognizing and honoring PW graduates who have distinguished themselves in their chosen careers. Today we are very, very happy to have 3 more PW Colonials with us. Amongst other things, we have an aviation pioneer. We have a French television producer and photographer, and we have a film producer and documentarian. We urge you to listen and to watch as they share their experiences with you. And hopefully you will take something from it, and hopefully you will hear something about how Plymouth White Marsh impacted on their lives and their chosen careers. So to get things started, I would like to introduce our first student presenter, Raquel Dunoff.
After graduating from PW in 1966, Janis Keown-Blackburn applied to become a flight attendant. Growing up, she always dreamed of flying, but in the 60s, it was the norm for women to become flight attendants. However, when she was not hired to become a flight attendant, she took the bold step and enrolled in flying lessons to become a pilot instead. Throughout aviation school, she was often the only female in her classes. I can relate to this, as I am often one of few girls in my engineering and technology classes. Being the only girl in your class is difficult, and the guys often test you to see if you know your stuff. But Ms. Keown-Blackburn ignored the haters and beat the odds, making it through aviation school and becoming the first commercial pilot, or becoming a commercial pilot for 14 years for many different airlines. And she was the first female pilot to fly for both Princeton Airways and Sun Country Airlines, and the first female pilot to retire from Spirit Airlines. Her experience teaches us that with perseverance and strength of character, you can make it through challenges and have a very successful career. Even though there's a mandatory retirement age for commercial pilots, she continues to fly, teaching lessons to students. She has served as executive director and secretary for the New Jersey Aviation Education Association. She also wrote a children's book on airplanes, has been in a Girl Scout training video teaching about weather, and was featured in the books Ladybirds and Women at Work. Her work for aviation education has inspired many students to become dedicated pilots like her. She also participates in civil service to protect and serve her community. She flew for the Civil Air Patrol, where she was squadron commander, a flight academy commander, and a flight instructor. Today, she serves her community in Belmar, New Jersey through local politics. She has served as commissioner for the Belmar, New Jersey Housing Authority since 2011, and she also volunteers for many local councils, like the Belmar Women's Club. Her 36th year as a pilot, which included more than 22,000 hours in the air, culminated with her induction into the Aviation Hall of Fame and Museum in New Jersey. Ms. Keown-Blackburn holds an associate's degree from Middlesex County College and a BA from Rutgers University. With her many achievements, she is proof that you can be successful in whatever field, even if you're a minority. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing Ms. Keown-Blackburn, a pilot, role model, and teacher.
I am very honored to be in such a distinguished group of graduates from this high school. I certainly want to thank Raquel for the wonderful introduction, Mr. McConney, Dr. McConney, and the staff and the organizers of today, and the recognition. and certainly my family and friends who came with me today. When I was a student here at Plymouth Whitemarsh, of course education was stressed, but we were also taught respect, and that I think was as important as the education that we got here. Kim Newell asked me what teachers inspired me. Well, there were several, but the two that come to mind were Mr. Kuhn, our music teacher, and what he said to us on day one was, if you learn nothing else in this class, you will learn the words to the national anthem, and you will learn how to stand during the national anthem. And that has stuck with me for all these years. He also taught me the love of classical music, which I still listen to. One of the classes that I absolutely hated was gym. But Mrs. Young always said to us, I will never ask you to do something that I don't do first. As an airline captain, it was never my responsibility to go back and help the flight attendants clean up the aircraft. But as soon as I finished my work, I would go back and help them do whatever they needed to do, because I shouldn't ask them to do something that I was not willing to do myself. My career was not as long as I would have liked, but always very exciting. When you are one of the very early women pilots in the airlines, at first, a lot of people didn't really want us there. And I learned to use humor. I learned that if I did my job and if I worked hard, I earned the respect of the men that I flew with. My job was always wonderful. I loved every moment of it. I loved the sights, the sounds, and certainly flying that big airplane. I loved it on day one, and I loved it as much on my retirement day. Way back in the early 70s, to earn hours to get on with the airlines, I taught flight instruction, where I taught students to fly. Now I'm retired, and I'm back right where I was back in the 70s. I'm flight instructing. After all, I only have 22,445.4 hours, but who's counting? Something I learned many, many, many years ago, my mother taught me, was to volunteer. We lived near a firehouse, and they had dinners, and at probably 10 years old, I was helping to serve at dinners. While here at Plymouth Whitemarsh, I worked as a library aide, and I helped in the main office. After graduation from here, I was a member of a crisis hotline for a couple of years while it lasted. And in Belmar, as Raquel said, I was on the council, and I'm now on the Environmental Commission, Zoning Board, and several other things, including the CERT team, which is very, very important. But my passion still lies with volunteering in aviation, whether I'm talking to Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts, to junior ROTC, or to Civil Air Patrol cadets. I love every minute of it. My yearbook had a statement that one of my friends wrote, I want my pilot's license. Everybody laughed all the time I was here at PW because I would say, I want my pilot's license. I have one piece of advice for everyone in the room. Find your passion and go for it. Don't let anyone tell you you can't do it. Thank you.
Plymouth Whitemarsh High School graduate Janis Keown-Blackburn always had an idea of what she wanted to be.
When I was 2 or 3, maybe 4 years old, I would always go outside and look at airplanes when they passed over, and I always wanted to be up there.
At a time when women could only fly commercially as flight attendants, Janis Keown-Blackburn wanted to be a pilot. So she earned her pilot's license, taught flying lessons, and applied for several years until the glass ceiling finally cracked in the late 1970s and the commercial airlines began hiring female pilots.
My first jet that I flew was with Sun Country Airlines out in Minnesota, and I was their first and at that time only female pilot that was there, to the point where they sent me to a tailor to have my uniform. She had to do the uniform, And the only restriction was it had to be the same material that they used for the guys.
In her 35-plus year career as a pilot, Janis Keown-Blackburn was also the first woman to crew the A300 aircraft and the first female captain at Kiwi Airlines. Gradually, things changed as more women entered aviation.
Some of the fun things, I've flown with an all-female crew several times, and what was even more fun than that, there were several times I flew where both pilots were women and all of my flight attendants were male.
I think her courage is to be commended, because at a time when many women would be hesitant to go into the profession of aviator, pilot, she took, the bull by the horns and said, I'm going to do this.
If when boarding or getting off an airplane, travelers, especially children, looked into the cockpit, Janis Keown-Blackburn would often invite them in and show them the controls. Her dedication to encouraging children's interest in flying led her to write a book titled Teddy the Airplane.
I read it in a first grade class, and a little girl said, I didn't know girls could fly airplanes. So that was thrilling to hear a little girl say that and to learn something that day.
After retiring from Spirit Airlines in 2013, Janis Keown-Blackburn returned to teaching through the Monmouth Area Flying Club at the Lakewood Airport in New Jersey.
Teaching is a lot of fun. It's most of the people that want to learn, really want to learn, and they're excited about it, so it's exciting to teach them.
She's super sweet and she's funny too. And it's also kind of cool that she's a woman, because I just feel like pilots, it's always like so male dominated. So it's just really nice to know that like someone else has like the same interests as you, or like has like flown commercially for so long. So it was cool.
Back on land, Janis Keown-Blackburn is also a popular civil servant and volunteer in her community of Belmar, New Jersey.
I wouldn't know where to begin. She's done so much. Just showing up at things. Many people will say, oh, I'll be there, and then you never see them again. And Janis always shows up. And to me, that is the most important thing.
She's also quick to lend a hand to support a number of nonprofit organizations in the area. Janis Keown-Blackburn has also officially served on Belmar's Environmental Commission, the Housing Commission, and was elected to the Borough Council in 2012, where among other things she helped to rebuild the town's boardwalk after Superstorm Sandy. She believes that everyone should volunteer as part of their community.
Oh, it always makes you feel good, no matter what it is. You're helping people, you're meeting people, you're learning some things that you didn't know before. So it's a win-win situation, I think.
Janis Keown-Blackburn's dedication to community was already a part of her character when she was a student at Plymouth Whitemarsh High School, being an active member of PW's Future Business Leaders of America and helping to run the school store, as well as volunteering with the Lincoln Fire Company Auxiliary. But it was Mrs. Young, a gym teacher at PW, who gave Janis Keown-Blackburn a mantra that has stuck with her through her career as a pilot and in her volunteer activities.
I hated gym class, hated it. We had a gym teacher, and she said to us, I will never ask you to do something that I'm not willing to do first. And to this day, I will never ask a student to do something that I'm not willing to do, or anywhere else. When I was with the airlines, the flight attendants have to kind of straighten up the cabin. Once I finished my stuff in the cockpit, I would go back and help them clean up the cabin if there was time. And it was just because I did not want my crew to do something that I was not willing to do.
Whether serving as a pioneer for women in aviation or serving her neighbors as a volunteer in Belmar, Janis Keown-Blackburn continues to inspire others to follow their passions.
I am very honored to have the privilege of introducing our distinguished PW alum, Mr. Bruce Frankle. Mr. Frankle graduated from PW in 1969 and has spent the past 36 years covering events around the world for TF1, French television's largest media outlet with 7 million viewers. Working primarily as a producer, but sometimes filling in as a cameraman and reporter, Mr. Frankle has covered news all around the world, including many of the top stories of the past 4 decades, such as the 1984 Olympics, the 1987 Wall Street crash, the Gulf War, and the 9/11 attacks. His stories from around the world, such as the time he was held captive by Saddam Hussein, astounded me and amazed me. Mr. Frankle's esteemed career as a journalist began here at PW. Basketball was very popular during his high school years because PW had recently won the basketball state championship. Mr. Frankle played basketball until the other players grew taller than him, something that is an issue for me as well. To stay involved, he put together a weekly basketball program of original material for the season. With no money to work with and new supervision, Mr. Frankle became a sports journalist. He obtained his passion for film as a student at Penn State, where he ran the International Film Society. Great movies were being produced around the world when he was growing up in the 60s and 70s. The world cinema was exploring many issues that young people reflected upon at the time, and this caught his interest. So he began pursuing technical knowledge and making movies. Additionally, Mr. Frankle has worked as a still photographer. In 2007, he was chosen as the principal photographer for the 100th anniversary edition of the British literary magazine, Granta, and has also had a number of exhibitions of his photography. However, putting all of his accomplishments aside, Mr. Frankle has truly changed the way I will look at events in my life based upon the following advice that he gave me. Failure is the best teacher, so don't be afraid to fail. As you have heard, Mr. Frankle has accomplished so much in his career, but his success did not come without some failures along the way. He surely learned from these failures and was able to expand his horizons and accomplish his goals. I think that turning failures or bad experiences into something positive is something that we all can work on to become successful. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming back to PW one of our own, Mr. Bruce Frankle.
Thank you, and it's a great honor to be here, and thank you for welcoming me back. Failure is a great teacher, but I was just thinking that, in fact, it's about finding solutions to problems, which in my job as a journalist, we start every day at zero. Every day there's a news program that's going to come on at 8 o'clock in the evening. Not 8:05, not 8:01. And if they want a story about whatever, we have to go out and make it from scratch. With France, we have a 6-hour time difference. So the evening news broadcasts at 2 o'clock Eastern time. So that means if, for instance, yesterday a drunk driver killed a person and injured 22 other pedestrians on Times Square. So I was having a nice coffee in my apartment in the morning and the call came, run there, do that, do this. And I have these deadlines that have to be met because they're not going to stop the news and say, oh, we're waiting for the story from New York because the guy's a little bit late. So I think that the failure part is also a question of finding solutions. And every day it's finding new solutions to resolve problems that we can't even foresee. So while it's great to explore the currents of political, social change that are happening every minute, it's also with this practical side of how am I going to take that? How am I going to condense quite often complex ideas into 1 minute 30 that an audience who has no idea about what a certain thing might be can understand. It's that, it's the technical aspects, it's all of this. So it's a very great job for somebody with short attention span like myself. And so we're always moving on, we're always changing, and this is, here at PW, when we made this basketball program, the coach one day said to me, here are covers for a year, or for the season, you and Jimmy Graham and Marianne Caparo have to put together a program that we can sell. And it was really the first bit of journalism, because we were writing articles every week, which was a great start, even though I had no idea I was going to end up being a journalist. So you're going to see this video that's sort of like the highlights. And I can tell you there are lots of lowlights, because a lot of the job is quite tedious, hurry up and wait, boring things. But the images you'll see are images that I've shot or produced along the way. And one of the interesting problems for me was material from the 80s. I wanted to show that we do interviews with people. And I was looking through my archives, and I came upon a writer named Norman Mailer, who was a very important writer. And I'm thinking, you kids are not going to know who Norman Mailer is or was. He was a great writer. He was one of the most important writers in the 60s, 50s, 60s, and 70s in the United States. And I've chosen two interviews with two excerpts with two people who I hope you know. One is John Glenn, one is Bruce Willis, but because they're much more in the popular mind. But at the same time, I'm realizing even 9/11 is not something that you have a direct connection with. So to talk about World War II, or to talk about the Vietnam War, or to talk about certain personalities in history is very difficult. So this I learned putting this video together. I mean, this was, I didn't realize this, I didn't realize the difference in our ages, our generations, and what is common knowledge, what isn't, until I put this video together. So even this was a kind of learning experience for me. But it just shows that even the news is something that, besides happening every day, every minute, there are 22 wars going on around the world as we speak, old news becomes history, and history becomes forgotten. And I think in the end, for me, being a journalist was very important, because we write the kind of footnotes that can eventually be turned into history by minds much more intelligent and far-seeing than we have the capacity to do, because we're kind of like an ambulance that arrives on the scene, and then it's left to the surgeons and the doctors to make it into something whole. So it's been, for me, a wonderful career that started innocently enough with my love of PW basketball, which, so you never know how things are going to go, and you have to be open, you have to be ready to accept problems to resolve that you didn't even imagine existed. You have to make your own decisions about things, and it's always best to know what limitations are. I can cover a war better than a young guy, because I know not to go there, not to go there, even though the younger person's instinct is probably more newsworthy. I understand. So you have to, it's always good to know what your limits are, what the limits are in a situation, to know when you can bend those limits, and always that you have to come back with a product that's going to serve somebody from your efforts. So thank you for offering this honor to me. I'm very honored.
News is information, be it topical like the 1988 Space Shuttle Discovery's landing in California, or a feature story such as the gangs of Los Angeles. In 1981, I began working in the small New York news bureau of French TV 1. Our objective was to provide informative stories to our audience in France. The 1982 funeral ceremony of the jazz pianist Thelonious Monk was one of the first stories I produced. Our beat, North America. Our only limitation was the extent of our curiosity. From following the French adventurer Jean-Louis Etienne, who was skiing to the North Pole, to meeting people as diverse as the actor Bruce Willis,
I worked a lot more with my own imagination. Moving out, we were
or the astronaut John Glenn. From 1990 to 94, I was based in Hong Kong, from where we covered Asia. Everything was a challenge, the first big one being the Gulf War in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Iraq, where Saddam Hussein detained us for a week. Returning to East Asia, the normalization of Cambodia after 30 war-ravaged years provided compelling stories, including the return of the leader Prince Sihanouk and the country's first elections. People waited hours to vote. In Manila, in the Philippines, life is poor, but especially so on Smoky Mountain, which is a garbage dump where people live in shacks and earn rice by selling what they've scavenged. In Beijing, it felt like I was in a movie when attending the Chinese Communist Party meeting in the Great Hall of the People. And even more movie-like but dangerously real was covering the violence of a breakdown in communications. The 1992 riots in Bangkok. Jerusalem. The name means city of peace, but it is a city and a region in constant conflict. From 1994 to 97, I covered the endless strife between Palestinians and Israelis, the collision of cultures, of traditions, and above all, the fight over land. Everybody is right, everybody is wrong. From the most sublime, the holiness of the city for the three religions of the descendants of Abraham, to the hope of normalization, such as the first elections in Palestine, to the horrors of terrorism, or the illegal colonization of captured lands, and war. Normally, my return in 1997 to Washington, D.C. should have been peaceful after the chaos of the Middle East. Features stories like the Rolling Stones in Chicago, or the training of the first female Marines in South Carolina, or the annual Rainbow Family hippie reunion, mixed with the harder news story of President Clinton and Monica Lewinsky. However, everything changed on September 11th, 2001. That morning, I raced to Union Station to catch a train north.
That this is the last train en route to New York. You're aboard this train, this is the last one, and we hope that we'll get to New York.
The World Trade Center had been attacked. For days, weeks, years, a major portion of my work would be based around that horrific act of terrorism. And with time, an equilibrium is found. Hot news again mixing with softer news. Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. Or Superstorm Sandy ravaging New York, with the questions of how climate change affects us. The Occupy Wall Street protests, with the questions raised about social injustices. The racial unrest in Ferguson, sparked by a police shooting. Fracking, the conflict between cheaper fossil fuels and how that plays against the need to reduce carbon dioxide particles in the atmosphere. And on the lighter side, the yearly buffalo roundup in South Dakota.
Sigh of relief. Thank you, Iowa.
Of course, there is always politics. In 2006, I returned to New York. It has been a challenging and a fascinating career.
In a world as complex and ever-changing as ours, there are few who can successfully discover their passion and follow wherever it leads. Academy Award nominee Susannah Ludwig is one of those unique people. Starting from the screens of CITV, Ms. Ludwig developed a passion for film that has stuck with her ever since. Although she was not initially certain what role to take in the film industry, she discovered that working as a producer brought together many of her interests, including leadership and organization. Following her graduation from Ithaca College, Ms. Ludwig has pursued her own entrepreneurial path through the film industry. While the title producer may evoke an image of someone distant from the actual movie production, Ms. Ludwig's role is very active. She oversees her projects from beginning to end and helps develop ideas, oversee editing, and determine how the final product should be distributed, in addition to raising money for the film. This hard work has earned her a 2013 Academy Award nomination, as well as the award for Best Documentary Series from the International Documentary Association in 2011, and the Best Documentary Award at both the Sarasota Film Festival and Avignon Film Festival in 2005. She finds herself most driven to documentaries because, in her words, real people are fascinating. Outside of crafting documentaries, Ms. Ludwig has dedicated her time to creating Portraits That Move, a company that creates professional, documentary-style videos for families. She also is an active contributor to the websites A Child Grows in Brooklyn and Philly, as well as serving on the board of the Kids in Need Foundation. These side projects show her dedication for working with children. Ms. Ludwig's rise through the film industry and immeasurable success with documentaries is truly inspiring, especially with film production being a male-dominated profession. For those aspiring to the film industry, Ms. Ludwig has 3 words of advice. Know yourself, be open to all opportunities, and be willing to work hard. By following Ms. Ludwig's advice, work ethic, and passion, one is sure to find similar success. It's my pleasure to introduce Ms. Susannah Ludwig, PWHS Class of 1989. Standing here in this room makes me remember the 15-year-old me who came here with a dream. A dream of being an actor, of dominating this stage, of going on to be in Broadway musicals. In freshman year, unfortunately though, I came up against a very harsh reality. I really couldn't act, and I was even less talented as a singer. Then someone suggested I get involved with CITV. I wish I could remember who made that suggestion, because I would like to thank them. That decision changed my life. In my 4 years here, I created music videos and short news pieces, and even a children's television show called Colonial Kids. Because I have a specialty in videos about kids, I'd say that was foreshadowing. I got a degree in television and radio at Ithaca College, and then my master's in media studies at the New School University in New York. The lessons I learned about video production right here at PW carried me in my undergraduate and graduate studies. I learned that filmmaking is a team sport, and the most interesting part is the team you work with. I learned the craft of shooting and editing. I learned the exciting nature of putting together each production and the distribution plan for the project. With each piece I created, I honed my skills and learned more about myself as a producer and as a person. It felt revolutionary in high school to create documentaries, and 3 decades later, it still does. I have been lucky to have worked on projects that are meaningful both to the people who are featured in them
in my films, as well as to the viewers that watch them. I feel so excited to do my work every day, and this is a true blessing. I often think about how my life might have gone in a different direction if I actually had had some talent as a thespian, or if I'd gone to a high school where there was no CITB. I believe that life plays out the way it's meant to. My career has been filled with emotional talks with with an expert on art heists, emotional talks with people worried about fracking in North Dakota, quiet moments with actors like Giancarlo Esposito and Russell Simmons as they talk about the benefits of meditation. The best part is that I get to share these adventures with the people that I love. Some of these people are here today, and I'd like to acknowledge some of them for a moment. First of all, huge thanks to my parents. Mom and Dad, you raised my sisters and me in a home where creativity ruled, where we learned that everyone has a story worth telling. This has been a guiding principle in my work, so thank you for that. Thank you to my Thank you to my sisters, Alyssa and Aubrey, for being huge cheerleaders and my best friends. You've watched hundreds of cuts, helped promote my work, and most of all supported my entrepreneurial endeavors. You were my first team, and I learned about true collaboration with you guys. Thank you to my Aunt Stell, who is also here, for teaching me that women can do anything they dream of. You helped me push through boundaries in an industry that's dominated by men. Thank you to my sweet 9-year-old son, Jack, who's not here because he's in school, but he's my biggest inspiration. Because of Jack, I want to do more to make a difference and to dream bigger. Thank you to Dave for being the partner I always dreamed of. With your support, I feel I can accomplish anything, and that means more than you could ever know. Thank you to the Delano family, to Maris for having Rachel, who is my lifelong soulmate and my longest friend. I've known her since she was 2, and she's also a graduate of my class, in case you don't know her. How lucky are we? And thank you to her sister, Deborah Brenner, for pushing me to apply for this award. I would never be here without your kind and generous encouragement. Thank you, finally, to PW for giving me this launching pad and for honoring me now. I'm very grateful to be in this little club. I leave you with 3 truths I've come to understand in a career of documentary filmmaking. I hope these will inspire you students as you embark on your new journeys. Number 1, kindness is the best approach. Number 2, we all want to be heard. And number 3, everyone has a story. Thank you for honoring mine.
I am a documentary filmmaker and a storyteller and a mother and a girlfriend and a sister and a daughter and a writer. I became a filmmaker because making films felt like the most organic way for me to tell stories. I am lucky enough to own 2 companies. One I co-own with an amazing director that I've worked with for almost 20 years, which is pretty extraordinary, and we make corporate videos and commercials and feature-length documentaries on a myriad of subjects and with all different types of clients. And then separately, I own a company where I make mini short documentaries for families of children. So families hire us and we make beautiful videos of their children. I really love what I do. I feel lucky every day to wake up and get to do what I do, and being a producer is the perfect synthesis of what makes me tick and what I'm good at. And most of all, I love that I get to work with all different people every day, and that part of the job is what keeps me going. And so I get really inspired by new projects, new people, new subject matter, new collaboration, and most of all, new opportunity to make a difference in the world through my work. And I think my mission is to create healing through our work. Every piece of work I've ever made in my entire career, there is some goal at coming to a new resolution or creating healing or helping people in some way. I think that when people are given the opportunity to have a voice and speak their truth, there's an opportunity for healing for them. So when you're asking anybody who they are and what their story is, which happens in every type of work that I do, you're giving them an opportunity to be seen and be heard. And that is really a gift that everybody wants on this planet. And I feel really lucky to both give them that gift and also to have the experience of hearing their story, because in hearing their story, I can grow more, we all can grow more, and I think we're all connected, so it's a beautiful thing to get to make work that shares that. I still want to do more and more documentaries of all different subjects. I'm fascinated by people, and I definitely want to. I love when people come to me with ideas, and I'm open to making anything. And any work that would create healing in a bigger picture way. So lately I've been very interested in doing work that feels a bit more political, or work that has more of a humanitarian bent to it. I'm wide open, but definitely I feel more and more driven every day as I get older and older to create change through my work.
Amazing. Big round of applause for our 3 inductees. Outstanding. This time, Mr. Gallagher, come to the microphone. We have one last component. We didn't have an opportunity last year, and since we transitioned to the auditorium so quickly, about 15-20 minutes for a question and answer session. Now that we have the 3 inductees here in front of us and live, we want to pick your brain about some questions you have in your specific field to inspire us even further. If you could stand and get your plaque on your chair, come on up front. Mr. Gallagher will lead a question and answer session with you.
And our first questioner would be Ms. Emma Smith, posing a question to Ms. Blackburn.
My question is, how have the hurdles in the aviation industry and technical fields in general changed over the years, and how would you advise young women looking to follow in your footsteps?
I believe it's changed over the years. Way back when I got on with the airlines, there were very, very few. As it stated in the video, at Sun Country, well, Princeton only had 18 pilots. At Sun Country, there were 52 pilots, and I was the first and only woman there. Today, there are more women in all of these industries, and we all look out for each other. We all try to help each other. We mentor. I know in the aviation industry, there are several online groups. We all email back and forth, and we try to help the newcomers coming in. So it's a little bit easier today. Just like I said earlier, work hard if it's your passion, and don't let any of the guys say you can't do it.
Thank you, Ms. Blackburn. Right, please, for Mr. Franco.
Mr. Franco, given your extensive experience in the industry, I'd like you to characterize the trust between viewers and news networks as you've seen it evolve over the years. How has this trust changed, and if it has, why?
Okay, first lesson in journalism, you only ask one question. Because I'll pick the part of the question that's easiest to answer. This was a big controversy this year in the elections about fake news and journalists to trust. It's a problem because media is owned by major corporations. So we could say, for instance, General Electric doesn't own NBC anymore, Comcast does. But can we say that NBC was pro-war because it would sell jet engine planes for General Electric and how it does its news? I mean, this is a fair question to ask. So I think the only way to really know journalism or know what's happening is what, unfortunately, I have the time to do, which is read everything and kind of determine what is real. So in the current situation with this special investigator into Russia for this Robert Mueller, so my wife interviewed and says he's as tough as nails. She says it's the toughest interview she's ever done, and she's done Condoleezza and Hillary. This guy for her is just a tough guy. Trump is great at playing the media. He's a genius, and in a certain way, you don't know if he's setting traps down the line for the Democrats who are all falling in this one line. Why do people hate Trump so much? Because he's not a traditional player. He doesn't owe people anything. He was a millionaire. And this is what I think, I'm diverging a little bit, but this is what I think is important from this election this year, is that you had Bernie, who's getting contributions of $12 a person, who's an outside voice coming in, and he did it his way, and he had a huge success. And then you have this billionaire who is doing it on his own, who's not going down the center, who's not going through the sources, the contacts of NBC, who was connected to this person, who's connected to this person. And it's very frightening in a way that Trump cannot succeed. I'm not saying I agree with Trump at all. I'm not saying I like the guy at all. But there's certain things he wanted to do. And this famous swamp that he wants to drain, he's realizing that this swamp is a very tough wall, whether you agree with the swamp or not. So I think that this affects, if you look at how the media has covered Trump, you have Fox on the one side, and you have New York Times, Washington Post, the networks on the other. It's not an exchange of news. It's not an exchange of ideas. Part of it is we deliver to audiences, and we target audiences. So we know that our audiences don't want to see certain things. So the only answer I can give you is you have to read multiple sources. And I think there's been a real deterioration. I know when we were young, when I was young, as a kid, we had a few news sources, and they seem to be dependable. Now there are a myriad of. Is that an answer to your question? Is that right?
Thank you, Mr. Franco. Precious Emmanuel from Ms. Ludwig.
Hello. Hi. My question is, over the years as a producer, how has your level of control affected your motivation, and which projects have you loved or loathed the most?
How is my level of, what was the first part?
How has your level of control over a project affected your motivation?
That's a good point. Okay. So the first thing is you never really have control. That's the first lesson. You think you might, but you never really do. So it's important to sort of, I think projects are kind of like children in a way. You are trying to birth them. You have an idea about who they are, what the path that they're supposed to take, and you have to kind of be open to however that plays out. And just like raising children, I know because I'm a mom now, part of what you do is you put together the best team and the best support for a child, and you sort of powwow with your team and you hope for the best, basically. So that's part A of your question. Part B, Tell me again, part B. I'm sorry, I got wrapped up in part A.
Projects you love?
Oh, I've loved almost every project I've ever worked on for different reasons. One of the things when Lizzie and I were talking on the phone, I told her is that sometimes as a producer, you're drawn to a project for different reasons. For me, usually it has to happens either because I really want to work with the people who are bringing me the project, or I like the idea, or sometimes I work on a project because it's a source of income and that's what I need to do. But in all of those cases, there is something to be learned and something that I can grow from in each one. So when I look back on my career, one of my favorite projects was a film that I made about 10 years ago called Stolen. It was my first kind of big solo project as a producer, and I grew tremendously while making that. I learned a lot about myself and about the process of filmmaking. But I can say that every project ever, along the way since then, I've loved equally. And the interesting thing to learn is how can you learn and grow and bring new parts of yourself to each project as they come up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And for our second round, we have Mr. Evan Klein for Ms. Blackburn.
Ms. Blackburn, voter turnout in the recent primary election was under 16% in Montgomery County. What message do you have to the graduating seniors about the importance of the involvement in local government?
I think it's important to be involved where you live, definitely. You want to know what's going on. You want to be able to state your opinion. But when you are involved in local government, if you're on committees and things, you have a little bit more influence over what's happening. The one thing being on the town council or on a commission, you really need to learn to listen to all of the residents, though. You may have an opinion that something needs to be done one way, but if most of the residents feel that that's not the best way to do it, that something else needs to be done, then you kind of, maybe they're right and maybe your opinion is not the best. So it's great. It's a great learning experience. I think anytime you get involved in anything, be it your community, any organizations that are out there helping people, it's good for both you and for whoever you're helping. As soon as you're finished here, you can certainly try to get involved with the student activities at the college you go to, or if you're working and living in this area, try to get involved in any of the organizations that are going on. It's a great learning experience and it's great for your soul.
Thank you.
Thank you. Brendan Vestal for Mr. Franco.
How did your brief captivity in Iraq as a guest of Saddam Hussein alter your worldview and how you cover stories either in the Middle East or world news generally?
Say it again.
How did your brief captivity in Iraq as a guest of Saddam Hussein alter your worldview and how you cover stories either in the Middle East or world news generally?
Well, we went into, I was in Saudi Arabia for 3 months covering before the Gulf War started, and the air war before the ground invasion, and we had to fill the antenna with news. I mean, you just have to keep turning things out, and there were restrictions of where you could go, what you could do, so we had to be quite sneaky and inventive and find ways to do our job. And when the peace was signed, the Iraq War was to, the Gulf War in 1990-91 was to liberate Kuwait, which had been invaded and taken over by Saddam Hussein from Iraq. So this was a question of pushing the Iraqis out and giving Kuwait back to the Kuwaitis, who were an ally of the United States. And we were on the border when the peace was signed, and we saw these refugees heading down from Kuwait, and they said there's fighting going on in Basra, which was the closest town. So we were about 30 journalists from about from 10 different news agencies, including a young guy from the Philadelphia Inquirer who had never been overseas before, and suddenly he's in this war. And we came on to the back of the rebels reacting against Saddam's army. It wasn't against the Allies anymore. And they held us for a week, and then they let us go because Saddam was cleaning his country. But I think we have the pressure all the time of making sure our competition doesn't beat us to something, which is quite obviously dangerous at times. And you're always going to be stepping on somebody's toes when you're covering the Middle East, because you can't talk to people about politics or religion without, everybody has their emotional attachments to both. So in the Middle East, when I was based in Jerusalem, I always had to make the decision, do I stand on the side of the Israelis and get stones thrown at me? Or do I stand on the side of the Palestinians and potentially have rubber bullets fired at me? So there's no answer. You just kind of figure out where it's safe, and you try to report as honestly as you can of what's, not having a political agenda, but you report as honestly as you can. But it's dangerous. There's times it's less dangerous. But.
And we also have Sammy Kendall from Ms. Ludwig.
Hello. Hi. My question for you is, how did you surmount your greatest challenge, obstacle, or low point? And at what time in your life or career did you realize you truly belonged in the industry?
Okay, I'm going to answer the second part first. So, I actually, at one point in my career, about 11 years ago, took about 9 months off because I had worked on a bunch of different movies, and I had gotten my master's degree, and I had worked really, really hard, but I was a little bit burnt out. And I said, I'm going to see what else I might like to do. And I thought, I'm going to teach yoga, I'm going to open a bookstore. I had all these crazy ideas. But then ultimately, I came back to being a filmmaker because I realized that A, it's what I love to do, and B, I'm sort of good at it, and C, it's really fun. And to me, part of what I think is important is if you have a career that keeps you awake at night, where you're like, you wake up and you're thinking about it and you have ideas and you feel impassioned and you kind of can't wait to wake up the next day, that means you're in the right place. If it's not like that, that means you're not doing the right thing. So for me, even though I tried to step away and do all kinds of other things, which I also loved, I had all these other, I wanted to cook, I had all these other ideas. I ultimately came back because I was pulled back into doing this thing. So that's part B. Part A, my biggest obstacle, that's a good question. Well, I think in general in the film business, I don't know if it's only my obstacle, but there's always a challenge to raise money. And also there's always a challenge with every new project, like the industry is constantly changing technologically. So a way that I might have shot a film 3 years ago is not the same way you shoot a film now. So you have to constantly be thinking about what is the new technology, how are people making things now, how can I be 2 steps ahead. Also, for example, I made a film called Stolen, as I mentioned before, that came out in theaters 11 years ago now. And it was distributed in theaters and on Netflix in a certain way. Now, the way people make things that are on Netflix happens a totally different way. Even though Netflix is still a distributor, the whole landscape of how films come out into the world is totally different. So one of the challenges is to constantly be learning and pushing and knowing kind of what's happening in the industry and keeping up with it. And then also, as I said before, fundraising is always hard. But I don't know if those aren't my specific challenges, but I would say any film producer would probably tell you those same 2 things.
Thank you.
Give a big round of applause and congratulations. Quite inspiring. Ms. Blackburn, Mr. Frankle, Ms. Ludwig, congratulations. Mr. Cooper. Everyone please stand for our alma mater. We have Precious Emmanuel and Samuel Emmanuel saying our alma mater.